Hello, I'm Mika Dika, Sam call me Mika, and this is the first YouTube video. Even though Bel'Veth is still quite new, and more testing I feel like needs to happen, I feel confident in giving some early thoughts. Now we first have to talk about the design, and it's quite interesting to put it lightly. Bel'Veth is a permanently stacking champion with a unique auto attack and a Baron Rift special interaction. As a Shyvana inflator, I'm quite a fan of this. As it's finally we're getting a champion that has this kind of special interaction with an objective on the map. I think other than Azir, Shyvana, and the Bel'Veth, there's no other champions that have these kinds of interactions. I won't be reading every single detail of this 200 years production of a champion, but you guys can check every single detail. She attacks faster, her attack speed cap is modified, her basic attacks only do 75% of the total damage, including her on-hit. No attack speed per level. She gains her attack speed by killing monsters and killing champions, and killing, of course, epic monsters. Her actual passive ability is that when she casts an ability, she gains 2 stacks. She then becomes ghosted, getting an increased amount of attack speed, and every attack uses up a charge. Her Void Surge, her Q, is basically her bread and butter ability. It's 4 jumps in 4 diagonals, works with on-hit and crit, gets a reduced cooldown per attack speed. It's a very similar ability to Viego Q or Yasuo Q. She can jump twice in the same way if angled properly. The jumps are kind of almost, I guess, 90 degrees. I'd say like 89 degrees. Her W is Red Cane W with a slow after that deals magical damage. It also resets the cooldown on her Q in that specific direction where the W was used. Royal Maelstrom is probably her most controversial ability. It's a defensive executability. It's the ability that makes her, I guess, design kind of weird, is because this ability is quite loaded with damage, and it's also an extremely potent defensive ability. Right now, I think this is probably the ability that makes her kind of OP in lower ranks and worse in higher, because a lot of strength is put into this ability, and this ability has a high cooldown, which of course in higher ranks would be easier to abuse. Higher ranked people would know how to bait it out, would not succumb to it, basically. Her ult, Endless Banquet. The passive component gives her every second auto attack on the same target, a stacking bonus through damage. The damage stacks, it's not multiplicative, just additive. She can also, when she kills champions or epic monsters, they drop a coral. She can ult, basically click onto the coral, dealing in an area effect true damage that's executing. She also gains then a bunch of stats. It's basically her stat stick ability. She gains bonus health, bonus movement speed, bonus attack range, increased total attack speed. The bonus health should be noted that it scales with AD, meaning that the more AD you have, the more bonus HP you have. The corals, specifically from Baron Nashor and Rift Herald, will give her that special interaction where she will become ulted for triple the duration. She will also then be able to come close to minions and spawn Void Remora. Every time a minion dies in her range, it's spawned as a Void Remora. As far as items are concerned, I think it's quite simple. You're gonna start off with Red Smite, and then you're gonna try to get Noon Quiver first. Sometimes you won't be able to get the full Noon Quiver, you might get like parts, but in general, you will try to get the Noon Quiver. Stay on the map as much as you can to get the Noon Quiver. After that, it's quite simple. You go for Kraken Slayer, Tabbies, or Mercs. I would go for Boots of Swiftness if you are not planning to go either of these. I think Zergs are also fine, but I think movement speed is a little bit more better on her. Blade of the Ruined King, I think those are probably her core items, the core first 2 items. You can switch it out for a Wit's End or that stance. Generally, I would prefer, if you're gonna switch out Blade of the Ruined King, for it to be switched out for the Wit's End. You would try to build all 4 of these items. That would be your cookie cutter build, and of course this would be, I would call them luxury items that you would get depending on the game. Guncio would be also your last item most of the time, or Guardian Angel depending on the game, Mortal Reminder if you need anti-heal, Sterak's Gauge if you need some survivability, or some tank items if you need. Titanic Hydra is also great if you need a cross between a tanky item and a damage item. These are just some suggestions. You of course could go for a lot of different things. Zhonya's even, some AP items that are defensive, so there's a lot of options as far as her last item or her last two items is considered, or if you have to switch out Vicent or Death Stance depending on if they're full AP, full AD. As far as runes are considered, there was definitely a debate to be had around Tempo and Conqueror, but I think at this point Conqueror has shown statistically to be much better. I think Tempo might be having some usages with different tanky builds and such, but otherwise I think Conqueror just wins out on overall utility and the fact that it gives you much more early damage. Other than that, everything else is quite basic. You go for Triumph as you don't have mana, the legend that you need in the game, attack speed or tenacity, Coup de Grace, or I don't know how that's pronounced, always fail it, or Last Stand, again depending on the game. If you need more, if you're gonna be having shorter fights versus squishier characters, or you will be having longer fights versus more tanky characters. There is really only one gameplay element that needs to be discussed in kind of detail. I will give a small rundown on her ganking. The basic ganking loop is you Q at your target, you walk as much as you can, then you Q, then you W, then you Q again in that direction, then you try to stay on top of the target, and of course E to execute. Of course you're trying to win as many Q casts, and certain situations will make you want to cast abilities in a little bit of a different way. You might want to flash to W to instantly be able to CC the person. On the other hand, the important gameplay element, really the most important, is what you do after you get to the rift. Now this can vary on how coordinated the teams are, what lanes are winning and what lanes are losing. Generally, the best play is to try to push down 2 turrets in a winning lane, and of course this can be extended to additional turrets. This all depends on are you able to extend the enhanced form by making kills or doing Drake. You can also get completely rotated on, and one mistake that causes you to die is enough to stop the Zerg. In cases that your team kind of surrounds you and starts following you, you can push, a lot, but most of the times in the solo queue environment, you will sadly get roamed on, rotated on. Most enemy teams react to it because they perceive the danger, but your team does not perceive, I guess, the value of it when, it's on their team. As far as jungle clears, I prefer doing the, as I call it, cheeky raptor start. You start raptors going into golems. You go into golems because your Q is not gonna be on a cooldown to do red. You go into red, into wolves. Now, of course, you can then gank or whatever. You should always stay flexible. In the case I think I'm showing, I actually ganked level 3. Then you do a blue or scuttle depending on if you have time. Did you fuck up the clear or did you gank, as in my case? Then from blue, of course, you do, after doing blue or scuttle, you do gromp. You go back to your raptors. And then you go back to your golems. Now the reason for this clear is that it gives you just enough gold to build the Noon Quiver. There are also additional benefits to this clear. You can start it solo, you don't need a leash. Sometimes you can't get a good leash, you just have a weaker bot lane, and you actually want to prefer, you would prefer to start this way. If you have a strong leash, of course, you should probably start at a buff, as it gives you a more, I think, consistent clear. Of course, choosing which path you're gonna take and how you're gonna jungle, it's all gonna depend game to game. Do you have a strong bot lane? Is the enemy jungler stronger than you? Are you gonna get destroyed if you meet each other? So there's a lot of different variables that as a jungler you generally have to consider when you're starting your clear. Some obvious pros and cons. She's a permanently scaling champion, basically able to attain gold throughout the game permanently. She has a knock-up and a slow in the same ability, which makes her quite decent at ganking, especially if your laner is strong. Basically, she has soft CC and hard CC. She has decent mobility, better in her true form, of course, as she can jump through walls when she's in the true form. Better than Rift Herald Powerhouse, that's quite unique to her. She's a true damage powerhouse, and her abilities plus items make her kind of capable of skipping armor penetration. So she's basically able to do maximum damage almost always. Some of the cons that are quite obvious would be, and the most one that's jarring to me, is the fact that she's a 340, 385 movement speed champion. That is so weird. I still don't get what Riot was going for. Like, I honestly don't understand what they were thinking when they made kind of like no other champion in her role has 385 movement speed with boots. All of them are 395 or 390. She's a scaling champion, so she's quite squishy early game. It's both a pro and a con, I guess, in the same thing. She's griefable by the enemy and your own team. Now, as a jungler, you're griefable by your team simply by the fact that they can just start stealing your camps if they're annoyed with you. But as Bel'Veth, this hurts even more because your scaling and your basically stacking completely depends on jungle camps. Now, of course, you can get takedowns, but you're just not gonna be able to ensure getting those stacks as much as you're gonna be able to ensure getting your 6 stacks every time your jungle is up. Item completion versus parts. The parts are like, really, I don't feel much damage increase when I'm getting the parts. It really only feels good when you actually have completed the item. And also the way she goes into her true form, and her true form in general I would say is a con. The fact that she has to sit there and eat a coral basically, it can make it very hard to get true form in fights. You will usually have to wait for the fight to kind of break apart and then actually get true form, or somehow get true form before the fight. I will be leaving you with some clips. As this is my first video, I would appreciate any criticism. You can expect more quick guides in the jungle and other content related to League, in the jungle especially. I also stream on Twitch, link in the description. So don't hesitate to drop a like, comment and subscribe. Peace! Nice! Okay. Oh. But they're stronger. They're stronger. Die?
My metamorphosis continues. Every morsel of this world will fuel our metamorphosis. Nowhere is safe.
Let's go, baby.
An ally has been slain.
Feel that reaver.
You remade in the voice.
They never get tired.
You are disappointed.
Let's go! This is how you play Bel'Veth. This is how you Bel'Veth. This is how you Bel'Veth.
And all that will ever be.
Oh, GG's. Give me your money. Give me your money, baby. Woo! Let's go, baby! I scaled. I scaled up.